Professor Misty glanced at the clock for the 10th time that morning, her nerves growing with each passing minute. Any moment now, the school bell would ring, marking the start of classes, yet her thoughts were far from the day's lessons. Absent-mindedly, she smoothed the fabric of her navy blue pencil skirt and tucked a loose strand of wavy brown hair behind her ear, trying in vain to push away the restlessness gnawing at her. Today was her wedding anniversary. 10 years had passed since she and Sheldon had exchanged vows in the warm embrace of her parents' garden. A day filled with golden sunlight, fragrant blossoms, and smiles that had never left their faces. It felt like only yesterday. Yet, as the hours crept by, there was no sign that Sheldon had remembered. No message. No flowers. No whispered acknowledgement of the day they had promised forever. Misty sighed, a bittersweet ache settling in her chest. Over the years, life had shifted beneath their feet. Routine had woven itself into their days, responsibilities piling up like bricks between them. She had devoted herself to teaching history at the local school, while Sheldon poured his energy into his career as a project manager in construction. Their once spontaneous romance had been slowly overtaken by deadlines, bills, and the quiet exhaustion of adulthood. Still, Misty had always made an effort to keep the spark alive. Breakfast in bed, candlelit dinners, small, thoughtful surprises. But this year, she had chosen to do nothing, to wait and see if Sheldon would remember on his own. A test, perhaps, though she hated to admit it. The possibility that he had forgotten entirely left a dull sting in her heart. The bell rang, snapping her from her thoughts. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her posture and stepped into her classroom, greeting her students with a warm smile. For a few hours, she was able to lose herself in the past, passionately recounting the events of the Industrial Revolution. But during the break, when she checked her phone and found no message from Sheldon, her heart sank a little more. She couldn't help but think back to the day their story had begun, 12 years ago to the day. It had been an ordinary afternoon, and she had been tasked with an important mission, picking up a birthday cake for a surprise party. With careful steps, she carried the delicate box through the streets, concentrating on keeping the frosting perfectly intact. But just as she neared her destination, a sudden shout rang through the air. Before she could react, everything turned to chaos. A blur of movement. A crash. The sharp scent of sugar and vanilla as the cake splattered across her clothes. Dazed, Misty looked up to find a young man untangling himself from a bicycle, his expression a mix of horror and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," he stammered, rushing to help her. It broke. I didn't mean to." Furious and covered in frosting, Misty glared at him. But as she took in his sheepish expression, something softened within her. With an apologetic determination, the stranger introduced himself as Sheldon and insisted on making amends by buying a new cake. Still grumbling, Misty reluctantly agreed. As they waited at the bakery, she maintained a stern demeanor, but Sheldon was undeterred, captivated by the fire in her eyes and the way her frustration barely hid the kindness underneath. When the cake was ready, they both absent-mindedly placed their phones on the counter, and in their haste, accidentally swapped them. Hours later, at the party, Misty heard a phone ring from her purse. Frowning, she pulled it out, only to realize it wasn't hers. The screen flashed with an incoming call, from her own number. On the other end, Sheldon's voice carried an amused lilt. "I think we have a situation," he said. Minutes later, he arrived at the party to return the phone. Misty's friends, intrigued by the story, invited him to stay, and to everyone's surprise, hers most of all, Sheldon fit in effortlessly. His easy charm, warm laughter, and quick wit won everyone over. And by the end of the night, Misty no longer saw him as the clumsy cyclist who had ruined her afternoon. Instead, he was someone unexpected, someone who made her heart race in a way she hadn't anticipated. That chaotic accident, a ruined cake, and a simple phone mix-up had been the start of something real, something neither of them could have planned. Yet life had written their love story perfectly. Now, standing in the quiet hallway of her school, Misty felt the weight of that memory settle over her like a warm blanket. She had never doubted their love before. But today, the absence of a single acknowledgement felt like an unbearable silence. By late afternoon, unable to contain her frustration, she called her mother. "Mom, you won't believe it," she began, her voice tight with emotion. "Sheldon completely forgot our wedding anniversary. Not a message, not flowers, nothing." There was a pause on the other end before her mother's calm voice came through. "Daughter, let me ask you something," she said gently. How many times has Sheldon forgotten to pay the mortgage? The credit card bill? The electricity and water? Misty frowned, caught off guard. Never, she admitted. He's always been responsible with those things. And when you've been sick, who takes care of you? Her mother continued. Misty felt her throat tighten. Sheldon, of course. Her mother's voice was soft but firm. My dear, a bouquet of flowers is lovely, but true love is not measured in grand gestures on special dates. It's in the quiet, everyday moments. In making sure you're safe, in carrying burdens together, in showing up when it matters most. Misty closed her eyes, her mother's words sinking deep. How many times had Sheldon prepared dinner when she came home exhausted? How often had he massaged her feet after long days of teaching? She recalled the little notes he left in her purse, the way he always held her hand in crowded places, the warmth of his presence on nights when she couldn't sleep. A wave of guilt and regret washed over her. How could she have let one forgotten date overshadow the love he showed in 1,000 small ways? Still lost in thought, Misty wandered into a shopping mall, her feet carrying her aimlessly past glowing storefronts. Her mother was right. Love wasn't about remembering every anniversary. It was about being there day after day, in all the quiet ways that truly mattered. And Sheldon had always been there. When Misty stepped into the quiet house that evening, a rush of emotions swirled within her. Her heart, which had been heavy with disappointment just hours ago, now brimmed with a newfound understanding. Love wasn't measured in grand gestures or celebrated dates. It was in the everyday moments, the unspoken acts of devotion that wove their lives together. And with that realization, she longed to see Sheldon, to wrap her arms around him, to whisper her gratitude for the countless ways he had shown his love without words. She heard the faint sound of running water, the shower. Sheldon must have just come home. Feeling parched, she made her way to the kitchen, her thoughts still lingering on the conversation with her mother. As she opened the refrigerator to grab a bottle of water, her gaze landed on something that made her breath hitch. There, sitting on the middle shelf, was a cake. But not just any cake. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned. It was the same cake, the very one she had been carrying the day she first met Sheldon. The same frosting, the same delicate decorations, the same treat that had ended up splattered across the pavement after their unexpected collision. A lump formed in her throat as tears welled in her eyes. At that moment, she heard soft footsteps behind her. Turning around, she found Sheldon standing in the kitchen doorway, his damp hair tousled from the shower, a shy smile playing on his lips. Misty couldn't hold back. She rushed into his arms, tears spilling freely now. "Honey, you remembered," she choked out, her voice trembling with emotion. Sheldon held her close, his hands gently stroking her hair. He hesitated for a moment before confessing, his voice laced with guilt. "Actually, your mother called me and reminded me. I'm so sorry, Misty. I didn't mean to forget. I feel like such a terrible husband." Misty pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her expression filled with warmth. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "You are the best husband I could ever ask for." She reached up, cupping his face between her hands. "You might have forgotten the date," she admitted, "but you've never forgotten the important things. You've never forgotten to be there for me. Never forgotten to take care of me, to support me, to love me. And the fact that you remembered this cake, our cake, tells me that what we have matters to you just as much as it does to me." Sheldon exhaled a breath of relief, his smile growing as he held her even tighter. "I love you, Misty. More than words can ever say. And I'm sorry if I haven't always been as romantic or attentive as you deserve." "You have nothing to apologize for," she murmured. "If anything, I should be the one saying sorry. I got so caught up in the idea of celebrating today that I almost forgot to appreciate everything you do for me, every single day. That's what really matters." They remained in each other's embrace, hearts beating in quiet harmony, letting the warmth of the moment envelop them. Finally, Sheldon pulled away just enough to glance at the cake behind her and grinned. "How about we order a pizza, watch a movie, and then cut the cake?" he suggested. Misty laughed, wiping the last of her tears. "That sounds perfect." And it was. As they curled up on the couch, sharing slices of hot, cheesy pizza, exchanging knowing glances, and stealing little kisses between bites, Misty realized something profound. Love didn't need extravagant celebrations. It didn't need fancy dinners, expensive gifts, or dramatic declarations. Love was right here, in the quiet moments, laughing over a silly movie, enjoying a simple meal, feeling safe in each other's presence. When the time came to cut the cake, Misty couldn't help but smile as she thought back to the fateful day they had met. How a disastrous accident had turned into the beginning of something so beautiful and lasting. You know, she mused as Sheldon handed her a generous slice. I think we should celebrate not just our wedding anniversary, but also the day we met. The day of the well-smashed cake. Sheldon chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. I like that idea. In fact, we can make it a tradition. Every year, on this day, I promise to drop a cake at your feet. Misty gasped in playful outrage, swatting his arm. Don't you dare. I'd prefer that we, and the cake, remain intact from now on. They both laughed, their voices blending with the warmth of the evening. As they savored the sweet, familiar taste of the cake, reminiscing about their journey together. The highs, the lows, the moments of joy, and the challenges they had overcome. Misty felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the love they shared. Gratitude for the life they were building, piece by piece, day by day. And in that moment, she knew. The true gift of their anniversary wasn't wrapped in ribbons or marked by the calendar. It was the certainty of having a partner who loved her unconditionally, who stood beside her through everything, who showed his love not just in words, but in the way he lived every single day. That night, as they lay side by side, exchanging a tender kiss before drifting into sleep, Misty reflected on how far they had come. They were no longer the impulsive young souls who had fallen for each other in the midst of a cake disaster. They were something even better, a couple who had learned that love wasn't about perfection. Love was built in the little things, in the everyday kindnesses, in the unwavering companionship that turned ordinary moments into something extraordinary. And so, wrapped in each other's arms, they fell asleep with contented smiles on their lips, their hearts full, knowing that their love was the kind that would last a lifetime.